You ever feel like the world's just too loud? Like all the noise, traffic, phones, people, crawls inside your head and won't let go? That's where I was in August 2017, 29 years old, stuck in a dead-end desk job, my eyes burning from staring at a computer screen all day. I needed to get away, to find somewhere quiet, somewhere I could hear myself think. So I packed my camping gear, hopped in my beat-up pickup, and drove to the Black Hills of South Dakota. I'd heard about a place called Whispering Pines, a remote spot deep in the national forest, 10 miles from the nearest road. No cell service, no trails, just pure, untouched wilderness. It sounded like exactly what I needed. I couldn't have been more wrong. I'd always loved the woods. There's something about the way the trees stretch up, their branches weaving a canopy that feels like it's protecting you from the world. The Black Hills were stunning. Towering pines, their needles carpeting the ground, the air thick with the scent of sap and earth. I found a clearing about a mile from where I parked, a perfect spot surrounded by trees that seemed to lean in, like they were whispering secrets to each other. I set up my tent, a small one-person deal, and built a fire pit with stones I found nearby. The first day was everything I'd hoped for. I hiked, sketched the jagged cliffs in the distance, and ate canned beans by the fire as the sun sank behind the hills. That night, I fell asleep to the sound of wind rustling through the pines, feeling like I'd finally found peace. I woke up around 2 a.m., and the world was different. My eyes snapped open, my heart racing like I'd been shaken awake. The fire had burned down to glowing embers, casting faint shadows on the tent walls. The air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on me. The forest was silent. No wind, no crickets, no owls. Just a stillness that made my skin prickle. I lay there, clutching my sleeping bag, trying to figure out what had woken me. Then I heard it. A whisper. Not words, not exactly, but a low, breathy sound, like someone exhaling too close to my ear. It was faint, almost swallowed by the silence, but it was there. I sat up, fumbling for my flashlight, my hands shaking as I unzipped the tent flap just enough to peek out. The beam cut through the darkness, catching nothing but trees, their branches swaying slightly despite the lack of wind. I told myself it was nothing. Imagination, maybe. Too many horror movies as a kid. But the whisper came again, softer, like it was moving away, then closer, circling the clearing. I zipped the tent shut, my fingers clumsy, and sat there, clutching my pocket knife, listening. The sound didn't stop. It wove through the night, sometimes faint, sometimes so close I swore it was coming from inside the tent. I didn't sleep. I sat there until dawn, the knife in one hand, the flashlight in the other, jumping at every rustle of leaves. Morning came, and the forest looked normal again. The sun filtered through the pines, birds chirped, and the air felt light, like the night before had been a bad dream. I laughed it off, blaming exhaustion and an overactive imagination. I decided to stay, not ready to let one bad night ruin my trip. I spent the day hiking deeper into the forest, following a faint deer trail that wound through the trees. The further I went, the denser the woods got, the canopy blocking out the sun until the light was dim, almost twilight. It was beautiful, but there was an edge to it, like the forest was watching me. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone or something behind me. Around noon, I stopped by a small stream to eat lunch. I was unwrapping a sandwich when I saw them, footprints in the mud by the water's edge. They were human, bare, and big, too big to be mine. The toes splayed out, pressed deep, like whoever made them was heavy or had been standing there a while. My stomach dropped. I hadn't seen another person in days, and I'd chosen this spot because it was so remote. I crouched down, studying the prints. They were fresh, the edges sharp, not softened by wind or rain. They led into the stream and didn't come out the other side, like whoever made them had waded in and vanished. I tried to stay calm. Maybe a hiker had passed through days ago, and the prints just held up in the mud, but they didn't look old. I followed the deer trail back to camp, moving faster than I meant to, my eyes darting to every shadow. The whispers started again that night, louder, more insistent. They weren't random anymore. They had a rhythm, like a conversation just out of earshot. I sat by the fire, my knife in hand, sweeping my flashlight across the clearing. Every time the beam hit the trees, I expected to see something. A face, a figure. But there was nothing. Just the pines, their needles glinting in the light, and that endless whispering. The third day, I was on edge. I barely left the clearing, sticking close to my tent, jumping at every snapped twig. I kept hearing things, not just whispers now, but footsteps, soft and deliberate, just beyond the trees. I'd shine my light, and they'd stop, only to start again when I turned away. I started noticing other things too. My water bottle, which I'd left by the fire, was moved a few feet away, sitting upright in the dirt. My backpack, zipped tight, was open, the contents untouched but shifted, like someone had rifled through it. I checked the ground for tracks, but there was nothing. No prints, no sign anyone had been there. That night, the whispers turned into something else. They weren't just sounds. They felt like they were inside my head, urging me to do something, to go somewhere. I couldn't make out words, but the tone was desperate, almost angry. I sat in my tent, the knife clenched so tight my knuckles ached, telling myself to hold it together. Around midnight, the whispers stopped, replaced by a single clear sound, a low, guttural hum, like someone chanting far away. It grew louder, closer, until it felt like it was coming from the trees themselves. I unzipped the tent and stumbled out, flashlight shaking in my hand. The beam caught something, a flash of movement, just at the edge of the clearing. Too fast to be human, too tall to be an animal. I shouted, "Who's there?" My voice cracked, swallowed by the hum. I didn't sleep. I sat by the fire, feeding it until it roared, the light pushing back the darkness. When dawn broke, I decided I was done. I couldn't stay another night. I started packing, tearing down my tent with shaking hands. That's when I saw it. Carved into the trunk of a pine tree just outside the clearing was a symbol, a crude circle with an X through it, the cuts fresh, the wood still pale and raw. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I checked the other trees, my heart sinking with every step. The same symbol was carved on 5 different trunks, all around the clearing. They hadn't been there when I set up camp. Someone, or something, had been here, marking the trees while I slept. I grabbed my pack and ran, the forest blurring around me. The whispers followed, louder now, like a chorus of voices chasing me through the trees. I didn't stop, didn't look back, just kept moving until I reached my truck. I threw my gear in the back and peeled out, my hands shaking so bad I could barely grip the wheel. The whispers didn't stop until I hit the main road, the forest fading in my rearview mirror. I didn't feel safe until I was back in civilization, surrounded by streetlights and noise and people. When I got home, I looked up Whispering Pines. Locals avoid that part of the forest. They say it's cursed, that people who camp there hear voices, see things that aren't there. Some talk about spirits of settlers who died in those woods centuries ago, their bodies never found. Others say it's something older, something that's been there since before the hills had names. I don't know what I believe, but I know what I heard. I know what I saw. Those carvings, those footprints, those whispers, they were real, and they weren't human. I haven't been back to the woods since, and I don't plan to. Some places aren't meant for us. You know that feeling when you're alone, and you just know something's watching you. Your skin crawls, your heart speeds up, and every sound feels like a warning. That's what I felt in the fall of 2011 when I went camping in the Adirondack Mountains of New York. I was 24, fresh out of college, reeling from a breakup that left me feeling like my world had collapsed. My girlfriend, ex-girlfriend, had packed up and left, and I couldn't stand the silence of my apartment. I needed to get out, to reset, to find myself again. The woods always had a way of making things clear. So I threw my camping gear into my old hatchback and drove to a remote trailhead in the High Peaks region, a place so far from civilization you could scream and no one would hear. Pause. That should have been my first clue. I'd been to the Adirondacks before, but never this deep. The trailhead was little more than a dirt pull-off, surrounded by pines and hemlocks that seemed to lean in, like they were guarding the forest's secrets. I hiked a few miles in, my pack heavy on my shoulders, until I found a spot by a small lake. The water was glass smooth, reflecting the trees and the sky like a mirror. I set up my tent in a clearing, the ground soft with pine needles, and built a small fire pit. The first night was perfect. The air was crisp, the stars sharp against the black sky, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. I sat by the fire, sipping instant coffee, thinking maybe I'd be okay after all. I went to bed feeling lighter, like the woods were stitching me back together. The next morning, everything changed. I woke to a fog so thick it was like the world had been erased. The lake, the trees, the sky, gone, swallowed by a gray so dense I could barely see my own hands. It wasn't just fog, it was heavy, almost alive, clinging to my skin like damp cloth. I decided to hike anyway, following a trail that looped around the lake. I figured the fog would burn off by noon. It didn't. If anything, it got worse, muffling the world until every sound, my footsteps, my breath, felt trapped, like I was walking through a dream. The trees loomed like shadows, their shapes blurred and distorted, and I kept stopping to listen, feeling like I wasn't alone. Around mid-afternoon, I heard it. A twig snapping behind me, sharp and deliberate, like someone had stepped on it. I froze, my heart thudding in my chest. I turned, squinting into the fog, but there was nothing, just gray and the faint outline of trees. I called out, "Hello?" My voice sounded small, swallowed by the mist. No answer. I kept walking, faster now, telling myself it was an animal, a deer, maybe a fox. But it happened again, then again, always just out of sight, always behind me. Each snap was like a needle in my nerves, making me jump, making me spin around, my flashlight useless in the fog. By the time I got back to camp, my hands were shaking, and the fire I built felt like my only anchor in that endless gray. That night, I woke to footsteps. Not twigs snapping, but actual footsteps. Heavy, measured, crunching through the leaves around my tent. They weren't hurried, not random. They circled the clearing, slow and deliberate, like whoever, or whatever, was out there was taking their time. I lay there, my sleeping bag pulled tight around me, my breath shallow, listening as the steps came closer, then stopped, right outside the tent. I could hear breathing, low, ragged, like it was right next to my head, separated only by the thin nylon wall. I grabbed my flashlight, my hands slick with sweat, and unzipped the tent flap just enough to shine the beam outside. The light cut through the fog, but there was nothing. No tracks, no movement, just the gray pressing in. I shouted, "Who's there?" My voice cracked, and the silence that followed felt like it was mocking me. The next day I stayed close to camp, too rattled to hike. The fog hadn't lifted. It was thicker, if anything, wrapping the forest in a suffocating blanket. I kept hearing those footsteps, sometimes close, sometimes further away, but always there, like they were playing with me. I started noticing other things too. My water bottle, which I'd left by the fire, was moved, sitting upright in the dirt 10 feet away. My backpack, zipped tight, was open, the contents untouched but rearranged, like someone had gone through it and put everything back wrong. I checked the ground for footprints, but the pine needles showed nothing. I told myself I was losing it, that the fog and the breakup were messing with my head, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. That night, the footsteps came again, closer this time, circling tighter. I sat by the fire, my knife in one hand, flashlight in the other, staring into the fog until my eyes burned. That's when I saw it, a shape, just at the edge of the firelight. It was tall, too tall and thin, like a silhouette stretched wrong. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, just stood there, watching me. I shined my flashlight at it, my hand shaking so bad the beam danced. For a split second, I saw eyes, pale, reflective, like an animal's, but set in a face that wasn't human. The features were wrong, too sharp, too hollow, like a mask that didn't fit. Then it was gone, swallowed by the fog, like it had never been there. I didn't sleep. I kept the fire roaring, feeding it every stick I could find, the light my only defense against whatever was out there. The footsteps didn't stop. They circled, paused, circled again, like a predator sizing me up. I started hearing other sounds too, a low hum, like a voice trying to form words coming from all directions. It wasn't human, but it wasn't an animal either. It was something else, something that didn't belong in the world I knew. I sat there, knife clutched to my chest, whispering to myself, "It's not real, it's not real," but I didn't believe it. By the third day, I was a wreck. I hadn't slept, hadn't eaten much, and the fog was relentless, pressing in like it wanted to smother me. I decided to pack up and leave, but as I was breaking down my tent, I found something that stopped me cold. Scratched into the dirt near my fire pit were lines, dozens of them, radiating out like a star, each one deep and precise, like they'd been carved with a knife. They weren't there the day before. I checked the trees around the clearing and found more. Scratches, shallow and jagged, like something had clawed at the bark. I didn't wait to figure out what made them. I threw my gear into my pack and ran, the fog so thick I could barely see the trail. The footsteps followed me, faster now, matching my pace. I kept looking back, expecting to see that thing, the Watcher, lurking in the mist. I didn't see it, but I felt it, its presence heavy, like it was breathing down my neck. When I finally reached my car, I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so bad I dropped them twice. I drove out of there, the fog thinning as I hit the main road, but that feeling of being watched didn't leave me. Even now, years later, I feel it sometimes, late at night, when the world's too quiet. I looked into it later. Locals talk about a watcher in those woods, something that stalks hikers, never attacking, just watching. Some say it's a ghost, others a creature older than the mountains. Rangers don't like to talk about it, but they warn people not to camp alone in the high peaks during fog season. I don't know what I saw, but I know it was real. Those eyes, that shape, it wasn't human, and it knew I was there. You ever feel so trapped you'd do anything to escape? That's where I was in the summer of 2020, 32 years old, stuck in my tiny apartment during the pandemic. The walls felt like they were closing in. Zoom calls, endless emails, the same 4 rooms day after day. I was going stir-crazy, my mind buzzing with anxiety, desperate for a break. I needed somewhere quiet, somewhere I could breathe. So I found a listing online for a cabin in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee, tucked in a remote hollow miles from the nearest town. No Wi-Fi, no neighbors, just a small wooden cabin surrounded by trees. The listing called it perfect for solitude. I booked it for a week, packed my car, and drove, thinking I'd finally find some peace. I found something else instead. The drive to the cabin was long, the roads winding through dense forest, the kind where the trees crowd so close they block out the sky. I arrived late in the afternoon, the sun dipping behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the hollow. The cabin was old, weathered, with peeling paint and a sagging porch. Inside, it was cozy enough. A stone fireplace, a creaky wooden floor, a single bedroom with a lumpy mattress. The windows rattled in their frames and the air smelled faintly of mildew, but it felt like a refuge. I unpacked, lit a fire, and sat on the porch with a beer, watching the forest settle into dusk. For the first time in months, I felt like I could think clearly. The woods were quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're the only person left in the world. The first 2 days were perfect. I'd hike during the day, following faint trails that snaked through the hollow, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. At night, I'd read by the fire, the crackle of burning logs my only company. I started to feel like myself again, like the weight of the world was lifting. But on the 3rd night, everything changed. I was reading, an old mystery novel I'd found on the cabin's dusty shelf, when I heard a knock at the door. 3 sharp raps, hard and deliberate, like someone was standing right outside. I froze, the book slipping from my hands, my heart thudding in my chest. The cabin was miles from anything, no roads, no neighbors, nobody should have been out there. I sat there, listening, waiting for another sound. Nothing, just silence, heavy and thick. I grabbed the fire poker from the hearth, my hands shaking, and crept to the door. I pressed my ear against it, holding my breath. No footsteps, no voices, just the faint creak of the cabin settling. I told myself it was a branch, maybe, knocked loose by the wind, but the air was still, not a breeze to be heard. I opened the door, poker raised, and scanned the porch. Empty. The forest beyond was dark, the trees swallowed by the night. I locked the door, double-checked the windows, and tried to laugh it off. Just my imagination, right? Too much time alone. The next night, it happened again. 3 knocks. Louder this time, like someone was pounding with their fist. I was in bed, the fire dying down to embers, when the sound jolted me upright. I grabbed the poker and shouted, "Who's there?" My voice sounded small, swallowed by the cabin's walls. No answer. I didn't open the door this time, just stood there, gripping the poker, my pulse racing. After a minute, I worked up the courage to look outside. Nothing. No tracks in the dirt. No sign anyone had been there. But as I stepped onto the porch, I saw it, a single footprint, Bare, pressed deep into the soft earth just beyond the steps. It was too big to be mine. The toes splayed wide, like whoever made it was heavy or had stood there a long time. From then on, things got worse. Every night, the knocks came, always 3, always around midnight. During the day, I'd find things out of place. A chair moved to the other side of the room, a mug I'd left on the table now on the floor, upright, like someone had placed it there. My backpack, which I kept zipped, was open one morning, the contents untouched but rearranged. I started checking the cabin obsessively, looking for signs of an intruder, but there was nothing. No footprints, no fingerprints, just the feeling that I wasn't alone. I stopped sleeping, lying awake with the poker next to me, jumping at every creak of the floorboards. By the 5th night, I was a mess. My eyes burned from lack of sleep, my hands shook from too much coffee. The knocks came again, but this time they were followed by a new sound, scratching, like nails dragging across the wood outside. It started at the door, slow and deliberate, then moved to the windows, circling the cabin. I sat on the couch, the poker in my lap, listening as the scratches grew louder, more insistent, like something was trying to claw its way in. I didn't dare look outside. I kept the fire going, the light pushing back the darkness, but it didn't help. The scratches stopped, and for a moment, I thought it was over. Then I heard it, a voice, low and guttural, right outside the door. It wasn't words, not exactly, but it sounded like laughter, mocking and cold. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark, the fire out, the poker clutched to my chest. Every sound, the wind, the creak of the cabin, the rustle of leaves, felt like a threat. The next morning, I went outside, dreading what I'd find. The scratches were there, deep and jagged, carved into the cabin's exterior walls. They weren't random, lines crisscrossed in patterns like symbols I couldn't read. I called the rental company, my voice shaking as I described the noises, the footprint, the scratches. They said it was probably animals, maybe a bear. I didn't believe them. Bears don't knock, bears don't laugh. That night, I decided I couldn't stay. I sat up, determined to catch whatever was out there. I turned off all the lights, let the fire die, and waited in the dark, the poker in my lap. The knocks came right on cue, but they didn't stop at 3. They kept going, faster, harder, until the door was shaking in its frame. I gripped the poker, my knuckles white, whispering to myself, "You're okay, you're okay." Then the scratching started again, not just at the door, but all around the cabin, like a dozen hands clawing at the walls. The voice came back, louder this time, a guttural hum that vibrated in my chest. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys, my bag, and the poker and ran for the door. As I yanked it open, the porch was empty, but the air felt wrong, thick, heavy, like it was pushing against me. I sprinted to my car, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly. As I fumbled with the keys, my headlights caught something at the edge of the trees. A figure, tall and hunched, its limbs too long, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. It didn't move, just stood there, watching me. I didn't look twice. I jumped in the car and peeled out, the gravel spraying behind me, my hands shaking so bad I could barely steer. I drove straight to a motel, checking my rearview mirror the whole way, half expecting to see that thing following me. When I contacted the rental company again, they admitted the cabin had a history. Previous renters had reported knocks, scratches, even seeing someone or something outside. They'd stopped listing it after my stay. I looked up the hollow later and found stories about a recluse who lived there decades ago. A man who vanished one winter, leaving behind only rumors of something unnatural in those woods. Whatever it was, it didn't want me there, and I'm never going back. That's my story. Something's out there in those woods, and it's not human. Sleep tight.